It's Michael Houghton here for Under 8 Hockey Fundamentals, Lesson 2, Push Passing. Just a reminder that this is Lesson 2 of 6, and there's the list of the lesson plans there. Lesson 1 is available from last week. So here's our overall lesson plan. We're going to do a warm-up, which is going to be an obstacle course. We're going to then do Activity 1, which will be Rob the Nest. We'll do a drill, which will be a push passing drill, and then into Activity 2, which will be Temp and Bowling, and then with a game to finish. Apologies, there's a typo there that should say obstacle course, not cups and saucers. But we're basically going to set up an obstacle course, which I will show now. Okay, so very simple. Basically, we're just going to set up some cones as follows. So we're going to have some cones here set up, and then a couple of cones here, which are jumping cones, and then a couple of cones here. So this probably looks more complicated than it is. But basically, our players will start here, and we're just going to ask them first to run around the cones. Run side to side to side. Okay, so like that, it's a lot of fun. And they come up here, and when they get to these cones, they can just jump over those cones, or just jump between them. It's hard to describe when I'm talking about it 2D. And then when they come here, they can run backwards. All right, so just make sure if you do have a slippy pitch, just be careful of that. But otherwise, they just turn this way, and they kind of look behind as they run. Right, which is something we do have to do in hockey, so it's important to have that. And they can come back to the end of the line. Alright, so they can do that a few times around. It should be fairly quick. Add some stretches in between as you're going, and they should have fun doing that. Alright, so we then have Activity 1, which is Steal the Egg. So this is a fun game. I have done this in the Play Practice Play series. There's going to be a slight variation on this because we're trying to introduce push passing. So very simply, we basically set up some cones here in the middle. The yellow here is the balls, so we have 4 cones, in this case orange cones, with a whole pile of balls in the middle. Ideally trying, if you can get 2 balls or 3 balls per player, that's great. You might have to borrow from some other sessions to get this going. In this case, I've set it for 6 players, but basically you just want to set up some cones roughly the same distance around the area of balls in the middle. And you'll see in this case that I only have two players in each cone. That's because this is going to be passing. There is another variation where players will dribble the ball back in, but we're actually going to do it differently this time. If you have more players in this, obviously just set up more cones around the place. Right, so you can set up more around the place as needed. I'll just get rid of that. I've just done this with 6 players. Basically, you're going to ask the players to work in pairs. One of the players will run through and get a ball, and that player will then pass the ball back. Okay. Once they've done that, they will run back, and the next player will go, grab a ball, and pass the ball back. So both players should be using our passing technique of getting a ball and passing back. Keep in mind, at this point, we haven't necessarily showed how to push pass. If you have a group that's new to hockey, it's probably recommended to show them how to push pass before we actually get going, just so they have an idea, or at least explain that we don't want them to be hitting the ball back and lifting the stick. All right, so we don't have to get too technical yet, but we can at least get some of the fundamentals of not hitting the ball and try to push the ball back at this stage. All right, so basically, as I explained again, one player runs, gets a ball, passes it back to the person who waits in the nest, and then the other person goes, and then the other person runs back to receive the ball. If you like, this is optional. Once the balls have run out, then you can have the players work in pairs to get the ball back. Okay, so let's get rid of my arrow. So in this case, it might be some balls here. Player 1 runs over and makes a long pass back. Okay, again, just use your judgment on that. If there's too many kids playing the game, it may not be sensible. But either way, once you finish, count the balls and you see who the winner is. So this is all about getting them to make lots of fast passes, lots of intensity because they're running and grabbing the ball. And the winning team is the one with the most balls at the end. Once they're finished, they can dribble the balls back into the middle. You can reset this 2 or 3 times. It's a good game to take up 12 minutes or so. From there, we go to our push passing drill. Okay, so this is our standard 2 cones apart, and we get the kids to push the ball. This does get fairly boring fairly quickly, but you should be able to take some time explaining how it works, showing it, and lots of technical correction here. This is real fundamental stuff. If we can teach push passing from day 1, then the kids are going to be great hockey players forever. It is a skill that once you teach, that they will have it. I've seen it from my own kids who were taught push passing at a very young age. They have a great technique as they get older. Okay, so we're looking to pair off 1 ball between 2 players. Okay, we're teaching the kids to pass off the back foot. Okay, we want them to get their stick directly behind the ball, so there should be no space between the ball and the stick, and we should never hear the sound of the ball being hit. Okay, so a good pass, you'll ideally just hear, a really good pass, the ball spinning against the surface. You shouldn't hear the sound of the stick clanging off the ball. Some kids will kind of sweep it. We should be correcting that as well. We want a genuine push pass. All right, so that's when we have the ball right up against the stick. Okay, as we start the ball off the back foot, stick behind the ball. The player steps through, so they're making a step to get of about maybe half a meter, 30 centimeters to half a meter. They're stepping in front, and as that weight comes through, they're gliding their hands along and sweeping the ball through. Okay, this is covered obviously in fundamental hockey courses. If you are new to hockey, then see if there is a hockey player within your coaching group that can actually demonstrate the push pass, because it is something that may not seem so obvious if you haven't played hockey before, but it really is important. Okay, we then look to trapping. Okay, so obviously once we've given the push pass, we're then going to look to trap. The best trap is one that is cushioned. All right, so just like catching a ball, when we catch a ball, we cushion it down. Okay, we're going to look for our players to do that. So they're going to trap it off the front foot and cushion it to the back foot. And the reason that we teach that is because if we can get them to cushion it to the back foot, then they're suddenly set up perfectly. Their weight has gone back, and they're positioned perfectly now to put their weight back on their front foot and push the ball forward. So it gives them a great way to kind of build momentum, trap, pass, trap, pass. And that's ultimately what we're looking for. So lots of technical correction here. This is one that really needs to be, it's a little bit boring for the kids, but at the same time, it's so important for them to get this skill. All right. Once we have that, we then go into our last activity, which is 10-pin bowling. Okay, this is a really fun one. The kids always like this one. Okay, now we say it's 10-pin bowling, but it's not really. It's six-ball bowling, but that's okay. Or six-pin bowling. Basically, we set up the cones in this formation here. So we have 6, 3 at the back, 2 and 1, 3 at the back, 2 and 1. Okay, we then have, this might be 2 meters apart. You can move this closer or further away depending on the ability of your group. So maybe if you have under 6s, you want to get a little bit closer. And if you find that one team is particularly good, you can move it back. Okay, we have a pile of balls here. At the start cone, we have our players lined up. And basically, the first player comes through, they grab a ball, they look to pass it and try and hit a cone. If they hit a cone, then we move that cone or take that cone away. Sometimes I just move the cone on top of the other cone, so we basically scratch that cone out. Sorry, I can't actually do that on screen. And then the next player comes along and they're going to make a pass. They've knocked that cone out, and so on. So basically, they just take turns trying to push past the ball into the cones. The reason this is quite good is because push passing generally is far more accurate than any other pass. And so this allows us to actually demonstrate that, look, you guys need to be push passing because that's going to be more accurate than a hit. Okay, so try and get them to push pass, and eventually the winning team is the one that knocks out all the cones. If they do this quickly, just put down some cones and repeat. As I said, if a team is fast, move the cone back so they can go from further back, and it's a little bit more challenging then. Lastly, we go into a game just like last week. Nice small game, 3v3, 4v4, or 5v5. Keep that nice and short. And that's our lesson plan, nice and simple. So this is number 2 of 6 lesson plans that I'll be doing over the next 6 weeks. And I've mentioned this before, but if you do have kids in older groups, so sort of under 10s to senior hockey, then check out the Play Practice Play series. This is Michael Houghton, and I will catch you next week.